My sister stood up at her own engagement dinner, raised her glass, and said in front of everyone that her fiancé was the only real soldier this family had ever produced. The table laughed. Her fiancé smiled. And I sat there quietly with 14 years of classified deployments, a bronze star with valor, and a unit pin on my collar that was about to destroy 9 years of a very carefully maintained lie. Because the man they were toasting as a war hero, he had just seen my pin. And he had stopped breathing. His wineglass slipped from his fingers. And the color left his face, all of it in 1 second flat. Because he knew exactly what that pin meant. And so did I. Stay with me. Because what happened next did not just change one dinner. It changed everything. This is a story about what happens when the person who has been quietly keeping everyone safe finally stops being invisible, and what the truth costs the people who spent years pretending not to see it. Every family has one. The person in the corner. The one near the tools. The one who fixes things before anyone notices they were broken. Who covers the gaps no one acknowledges. Who shows up quietly and asks for nothing. This story is for that person. And it is also for the people around them, the ones who decided who that person was a long time ago and never once stopped to ask if they got it right. If this story found you at the right moment, if something in it landed somewhere specific, please hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells YouTube this story deserves to reach someone else who needs to hear it tonight. Leave a comment below. Tell me, have you ever been the invisible one at your own family's table? Or have you ever realized, too late, that you had someone's truth in your hands and chose the drawer? I read every single comment. Everyone. Share this with someone who has spent too long being useful without being seen. They deserve to know they are not alone. And if you want more stories like this one, real, honest, the kind that stay with you, subscribe to this channel and hit the bell, so the next one finds you when you need it most. I need you to picture something very clearly. A dining room table, white linen, the good silverware, the set that only comes out when my mother wants the evening to be remembered. 14 people seated around a table built for 12. Candles, the kind of wine nobody mentions the price of. My sister standing at the head of it all, glowing the way she has glowed her entire life. Her glass raised toward the man she is about to marry. And Tyler Harrington is smiling. He has been smiling all evening. That easy, comfortable smile of a man surrounded by people who have spent 18 months telling him exactly how remarkable he is. He has been introduced to every guest tonight as a war hero. He has accepted every handshake with the practiced modesty of someone who has learned precisely how long to wait before accepting the compliment. He has told the story of Kandahar twice already tonight. Once at the door with my mother's neighbors. Once at the appetizer course with Derek, his best man. Both times the room went quiet the way rooms go quiet for something important. Both times touched the silence hold before he continued. He is very good at knowing where the weight goes in a story. I have been sitting at the far end of the table, near the extension leaf that does not quite match the rest of the surface, doing what I have done at this family's table for 20 years, pouring water, passing bread, asking Tyler's mother about her drive from Knoxville, being useful, being invisible, being exactly the version of myself this family has always found most convenient. I am wearing a simple navy blazer, dark slacks, the most forgettable version of myself I own, with one exception on my lapel, almost without thinking. I have pinned my unit insignia, a small piece of dull brass, the size of a quarter. The crest of the 760th Explosive Ordnance Disposal Battalion. I have worn it so long I stopped seeing it years ago. To everyone at this table, it is just a small bit of metal on a blazer collar. To Tyler Harrington, it is something else entirely. My sister lifts her glass. She smiles the smile that has been opening doors since she was 4 years old. She says, to the only real soldier this family has ever produced, my fiancé, Tyler Harrington, not the one who pushes paper, the one who actually went. The table laughs. It is a warm laugh, an easy laugh. A few faces glance in my direction the way you glance at the family dog when someone mentions walks. I say quietly, I am proud of what I do. And then I hear the laugh stop. I look across the table. Tyler Harrington is not laughing. His smile has not faded, it has stopped. The way a power cut stops everything in a room, all at once, without warning. His wine glass is halfway to his mouth and it is completely still, and his eyes have dropped to my collar, to the pin. The color leaves his face. Not gradually, all at once. The way blood leaves a man's face when his body understands something before his mind has caught up. His glass slips from his fingers. It hits the edge of his plate and shatters. Red wine spreads across the white linen like something opened. Nobody moves, Tyler says, in a voice I barely recognize. Where did you get that pin? And the entire evening changes. My name is Megan Calloway. I am 43 years old. I am a lieutenant colonel in the United States Army and the commander of an explosive ordnance disposal battalion. For 20 years, my own family introduced me as someone who did desk work, while the man my sister was about to marry had been standing up at veterans' events, at dinner tables, at his own engagement party, and claiming credit for something my unit did, in a room full of people who had no way to know the difference. Stay with me, because what happened after Tyler Harrington froze at that table is the story of how one small pin, smaller than my thumbnail, unraveled 9 years of a carefully maintained lie, and how the truth, once it had nowhere left to hide, finally forced my family to see the person who had been sitting at their table the whole time. I grew up in Clarksville, Tennessee, in a house that had two kinds of children. There was the one you watched, and there was the one who kept the lights on. I understood which one I was before I was old enough to spell either word. My father, Frank Calloway, worked shift supervision at a distribution warehouse for 22 years. He was a man of specific economies, of words, of praise. He measured the world by one rule. Work you could point to was real. Everything else was noise. He said it the way other men say grace, like it settled something that did not need reopening. My mother, Carol, ran a different ledger. What the women in her Sunday church group admired, that was real. A daughter with a ring was real. A daughter who could be mentioned in a sentence at the grocery store that made another mother go slightly flat with envy. That was the most real thing of all. My sister Brittany was born 3 years after me, and from the day she arrived, she was the daughter my mother could mention. She was bright in the way that fills a room. She sang, she charmed, she made everyone around her feel chosen simply for being included. When Brittany walked into a kitchen, every face in it turned toward her. I was the other kind. I noticed the porch rail had gone soft at the joint and fixed it before anyone fell. I knew where the fuse box was, which step on the stairs creaked, how to restart the water heater after it tripped. When my father needed a second pair of hands on the truck, he called me, not because he loved me more, because I would show up. I would not complain, and I would do the job right. I learned something young that took me 40 years to properly name. Being needed and being seen are two completely different things. In my family, I got the first. The second was not available in my size. Pause here. I want to ask you something honestly. Has a family ever assigned you a role so early that you stopped questioning whether it was actually true? Have you ever found yourself being useful to people who never once thought to ask how you were? If that question just landed somewhere specific in your chest, stay with me. You are exactly who this story is about. My senior year of high school, I brought home an Army ROTC scholarship, full ride. My mother sat across the kitchen table, read the paperwork, and said, after a very long silence, "The Army, of all the things, Megan," as though I had announced I was joining the circus. My father said nothing that evening. He absorbed things in silence, and released them, if ever, in private that night, after my mother had gone to bed. He came into my room where I was sorting through what to pack for my first field weekend. He sat on the end of my bed. He helped me fold a jacket I had not asked for help with. At the door he stopped, he said, "It is real work. Do not let anybody tell you it is not." That was the closest thing to a blessing I ever got from my father. 7 words. I carried them for 23 years. I commissioned in 2005 as a second lieutenant. When it came time to choose my branch, I chose explosive ordnance disposal. EOD is the unit you call when someone finds a bomb, when a device is identified, an IED buried under a road, a pressure plate beneath a market stall, a daisy chain designed to kill whoever responds first. Everyone with any sense runs away from it. We run toward it. We put on a suit that weighs 80 pounds and we walk, slowly and deliberately, toward the thing while the world is running the other way. We do it with our own heartbeat, the only sound we can hear. My mother heard the word ordnance and decided it sounded like an office. She started telling people I did administrative work for the army. I let her. Because correcting her felt like it cost more than I knew how to pay at the time. Over the 12 years that followed, I quietly covered my family's financial gaps the same way I covered everything. Without announcement and without expectation of gratitude. My father's cardiac surgery shortfall after insurance, $9,400. Brittany's deposit when she moved to Nashville to pursue her music, $3,200. My mother's car transmission. Brittany's credit card balance she called a momentary situation. One night I sat at my kitchen table at 2 in the morning with a yellow legal pad and added it up. $52,300. Across 12 years, there was one thank you note. It was actually a birthday card with a PS. I kept every receipt, not out of bitterness. Not at first, because EOD trains you to document everything. You reconstruct a scene from evidence. You never assume, you always keep the records. I had no idea, sitting at that table in the dark, how important those records would eventually become. Tyler Harrington came into our lives 20 months before the engagement dinner. Brittany met him at a charity golf tournament, the kind she attended because the food was free and the networking was good. He was 39 years old, former Army infantry, medically discharged after a knee injury sustained during deployment in Afghanistan. He was tall, square-jawed, and had the kind of firm handshake that made my mother reach for her pearls the first time they shook hands. He had a silver star. That detail landed in my family's world like a depth charge. Within 2 weeks of meeting him, he was being described at my mother's Sunday church group as Brittany's war hero. Within a month, the description had upgraded, without any formal authorization, to a real soldier, not desk work, the real thing. With a practiced glance in my direction that my mother had spent 20 years perfecting. His Silver Star was awarded in 2012 during a firefight in Helmand Province, when he helped evacuate a wounded soldier under fire. That was real. That was genuinely brave. That was legitimately earned. I am not disputing any of it. But Tyler had another story. And it was this second story, the one set a year later in Kandahar. In the fall of 2013, that had made him a legend, not just in my family, in his veteran circle. At the community events where he was invited to speak, I first heard the Kandahar story at Sunday dinner, 6 weeks after Brittany introduced him. My mother asked him to tell us about his service. He was modest at first, the way certain men are modest, briefly and strategically, in a way that makes you ask again. Then he told it. He said, fall of 2013, outside the Panjwai district in Kandahar province. My patrol, 8 men hid in ambush, IEDs buried on both sides of the road. We could not move forward or back, taking fire from the high ground on 3 sides. We were in a kill zone. He paused. The table was completely silent. Brittany had her hand on his arm, he continued. Everyone was looking at each other, waiting for someone to figure it out. I was the senior man in the patrol that day. I told my men the center of the road. That is where we go. The devices are on the sides. We go down the center, single file, careful, and we get out. And that is what we did. We walked out, all 8 of us. My mother was crying. Brittany was squeezing his arm with both hands. And I sat across the table and I listened. Something in the back of my mind, something trained and quiet and very precise, filed a note, the center of the road, IEDs buried on both sides. Pressure initiated, and an 8-man infantry patrol simply walked out because Tyler told them to. I filed the note. I did not open it yet, but I did not forget it. Over the following months, I heard the Kandahar story in various forms. Tyler told it at a dinner party. He told it at a regional veterans appreciation event where the MC introduced him and the room gave him a standing ovation. He told it to our Aunt Rosemary at the 4th of July, and Rose told everyone she knew for the following month. With each telling, the story had developed the shape of something rehearsed. The confidence of a man who knows exactly where the pauses go and exactly how to let the ending breathe. He accepted every version. He accepted my mother's increasingly embellished retelling. He kept his head when everyone else froze. He figured out the only path through. He led his boys home, Tyler never once said. Well, it was a bit more complicated than that. He accepted all of it with the same quiet, strategic modesty, and I noticed. The way I had been trained to notice things. Not loudly, not accusingly, but with the patient attention of someone whose job is to understand exactly what is in front of them before making a single move. 3 months before the engagement dinner, I ran into a man named Pete Garland at a Veterans Resource event in Nashville. Pete had served in Kandahar province in 2013, different unit, and we ended up at the same lunch table. Kandahar came up the way it always comes up among people who have been there. Pete mentioned the Panjwai district. He said rough area that fall. Had a patrol get boxed in out there. I'd kill zone, really nasty situation. EOD had to go in on foot to clear the road. The infantry could not move until EOD moved. I set down my fork. Pete continued. EOD walked it, device by device in the suits. Took a long time, but they cleared the path. The infantry was in bad shape by the time it was done. One of them had to be helped to the extraction point. He shook his head. Which EOD unit? I said. He thought for a moment. 760, he said, out of Campbell. I picked up my fork. My hands were completely steady. Because I knew which unit that was. That was my unit. I went home that evening and I sat in my kitchen for a very long time. Then I pulled up the operational records I was authorized to access. Panjwai District. Fall of 2013. 760th EOD Battalion. The action was there. The dates matched. The road matched. My unit had cleared that road. The team I had led as a young captain had walked that kill zone in 80-pound suits, device by device, down the center of the road. And 8 infantry soldiers had walked out behind us, including, according to the patrol record of the unit that had been pinned, a patrol whose senior man was a staff sergeant named Tyler R. Harrington. I sat with that for a long time. And then I thought about every Sunday dinner, every veterans event, every telling of how Tyler had figured out the path, how he had kept his head, how he had led his men through. The reason the center of that road was safe was because my team had walked it first. Tyler Harrington had not led his men through a minefield. He had followed a path that someone else had cleared, at the risk of their own lives, while he and his men waited. That was the part of the story he had left out. Not once in 9 years of telling that story had he mentioned the explosive ordnance disposal team that walked in on foot so his patrol could walk out. Not to my family. Not at the veterans events. Not to the MC who gave him a standing ovation. Not to Brittany. 2 weeks before the engagement dinner, Brittany called me. She was planning, glowing, talking about flowers and seating arrangements. And then, somewhere in the middle of it all, she said, Meg, I need you to do something for me at the dinner. Keep it low-key. Do not make it about the army. Tyler's military friends are going to be there, and it is his night. I do not want it to become a whole thing, I said. The army thing, she said. You know what I mean. With the small laugh she uses to sand the edges off something that might otherwise cut. I did know what she meant. I had been knowing what she meant for 20 years. I said, of course, it is Tyler's night. I hung up the phone. I sat in my kitchen. I thought about Pete Garland and the veterans' lunch in Nashville. I thought about the operational records I had pulled. I thought about the story Tyler had been telling for 9 years. Then I reached into my blazer pocket and I found the small brass pin I had been carrying since I took it off my uniform that morning. The 760th EOD Battalion insignia. I pinned it to my lapel, not as a statement, not as a challenge, just as the fact it was. I want to pause here and say something directly to anyone watching this who has ever suspected something was wrong, who has seen the gap in someone's story and filed it quietly away and said nothing. Because saying something would cost too much. would make things uncomfortable, would make you the difficult one. You are not imagining it. The gap is real, and the cost of your silence is real too. I know, because I paid it for 20 years. And I am still calculating the final bill. The engagement dinner was a Saturday in October. My mother's dining room, white linen, extended table, the good silverware reserved for occasions she would reference for years. 14 people, Brittany and Tyler at the center, where the light was best. Me at the far end, near the extension leaf that did not quite match the rest of the table. In the navy blazer with the small brass pin on the collar. I poured water, I passed bread. I asked Patricia Harrington about her drive from Knoxville. I was the perfectly invisible older sister. Exactly as requested, Tyler sat across and slightly down from me. He was charming, warm, comfortable. He held Brittany's hand on the table and laughed at Derek's jokes. He did not look at me. When the plates were cleared, my mother tapped her glass. Toasts began. Derek went first. A joke about Tyler's terrible taste in football teams and his inexplicably good taste in women. Easy warmth, easy laughter. Then my mother. She spoke about Brittany's beautiful heart and the man she had always hoped would come along. Her eyes glistened, then she looked at Tyler and said, "It means everything to this family to finally have a real soldier at our table." With a pause that came close enough to where I was sitting that our Aunt Rosemary glanced at me and then found something on her plate to study. I felt the familiar heat climb the back of my neck. I folded it down. I had spent 20 years building that particular fold. Then Brittany stood. She was radiant. She had always been radiant. The chandelier found her exactly right. The room tilted toward her before she said a word. She raised her glass toward Tyler. She smiled the smile that had been opening doors for her since she was 4 years old. She said, "To the only real soldier this family has ever produced, my fiancé Tyler Harrington, the man who kept his head when everyone else froze, who figured out the only path through when there was no path, who led his men home." She looked briefly in my direction. Not unkindly, the way you acknowledge furniture, not the one who pushes paper. The table laughed. A warm, easy laugh, the kind that does not know it has a blade in it, I said quietly and evenly, not as a challenge but as a sentence that existed and had the right to be said. I am proud of what I do, and that should have been the end of it. It always ended there, the joke lands. I absorb it, the night moves on. Except Tyler Harrington was not laughing. I looked across the table. His glass was still halfway to his mouth. He had stopped moving. All of him, the glass, the smile. The ease that had occupied that chair all evening. His eyes had dropped to my lapel, to the pin, and the color was leaving his face. Not fading, leaving. The way it leaves when a body understands in something the mind is still catching up to. His wineglass slipped, not dropped but slipped. From fingers that had simply stopped holding it. It hit the edge of his plate and broke. Red wine spread across the white linen. Nobody moved. Tyler said, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Where did you get that pin?" The table was staring at him. My mother frozen mid-reach with a cloth napkin. Brittany with her glass still raised. The smile still technically present. The certainty evacuating it in real time. I said, "It is my unit insignia. 760th EOD Battalion." Something moved through Tyler's face that I do not have a precise word for. It was the look of a man who has been carrying something very heavy for a very long time and has just understood, in a single second, that the weight is about to come down. He sat down. His legs made the decision before he did. He put both hands flat on the table. I watched them press down. I watched him use the pressure to stay in the room. He said, "You were on that road." I said, "My team was on that road." The silence that followed those words was the loudest thing that had ever happened inside my mother's house. Brittany lowered her glass very slowly. She said, "Tyler, what is happening?" He did not answer her. He was looking at me, and I was looking at him. And in the space between us was 9 years of a story with a missing half. I did not make a scene that night. Not because I am a perfect person. Because EOD trains you, the worst thing you can do in the 10 seconds after an explosion is move fast. You hold still, you let the dust settle. You find out what is actually broken before you reach into the wreckage. I collected the broken glass from the linen. I handed Tyler a cloth napkin. The dinner dissolved rather than ended. On the porch in the October dark, Tyler found me, he said. You know, I said, I know what my team did on that road. I know what the operational record says. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I need to explain it to you. Not here, not tonight. But I need you to hear the real version. I said, I will listen when you are ready. 3 days later, we met at a coffee shop, just the two of us. He was there before me, sitting in the back corner with his back to the wall, the veteran's reflex that never leaves. He looked like he had not slept. He said, I need to tell you what actually happened. All of it, I said. I'm listening. He took a breath. He said, we were pinned. Everything I have said about that is true. The IEDs on both sides, the fire from the high ground. We could not move. 2 of my men were hit. Not badly, but they were hit. And he stopped, he said. I froze, the words came out flat and precise. Like he had been rehearsing them for a long time, he said. I was the senior man in the patrol and I froze. I could not get my brain to work. I have been in firefights before and since, and I have never experienced anything like what happened to me on that road. I was behind the vehicle and I could not make myself move. He looked at his coffee, he said. Your team arrived 11 minutes after the first device was triggered. I heard the radio call and something came back to me. Something like gravity returning. Your team walked that road. I watched them through the vehicle window, going down the center, one device at a time. In the suits, it took 40 minutes. When it was done, one of your team members came to the vehicle and helped me out. Physically, I could not get my legs to work. He stopped. The coffee shop was very quiet around us, he said, and then I went home. I was in therapy for 2 years. And somewhere in those 2 years, the story changed. I cannot tell you exactly when. I think it started because the version where I figured out the path was easier to live inside than the version where I was helped out of a vehicle. And then I told it that way enough times that it became the story. And then I got invited to speak at events, and people gave me standing ovations. And Brittany believed it completely. And I let all of it happen. Every single time, he looked up at me. He said, your team's report is in my file. I have had a copy of it for 9 years. I know exactly what it says. I also received a formal notification letter in 2015. I had been recommended for a commendation for Kandahar. The review board looked at the full record, including your unit's report, and denied it, I said. And you kept speaking at events about your leadership on that road. He said, yes, said, I am sorry. I know that is not adequate. But it is the truest thing I can say to you. I looked at Tyler Harrington across that table, and I saw a man who had survived something terrible, constructed a better version, and lived inside it until the construction felt more real than the truth. I am not a therapist. I cannot tell you what that does to a person over 9 years. What I can tell you is what it costs the people whose names get edited out of the story. My team walked that road. My team cleared every device on that road. And for 9 years, at every dinner table and every veterans event, we did not exist. I went home and I wrote a letter, not an angry letter. I drafted 3 of those and threw them all away. The letter I kept was 3 pages. And it was the clearest thing I have ever written. Page 1, I love you. I am glad you found someone. I mean that without reservation. Page 2, I am done. Done with the financial support. $52,300 over 12 years. Delivered without acknowledgement. While I was being called a paper pusher at the family dinner table. Done with the arrangement that only worked as long as I remained invisible. I was done being invisible. Page 3, one document. My official military biography. Declassified and authorized for civilian release. Lieutenant Colonel Megan Calloway, EOD Battalion Commander, Bronze Star with Valor. 2 flat sentences about Kandahar, no drama, just the facts. Set down where my family could not unknow them. I mailed it Thursday. Brittany called Saturday morning. She said, so you are punishing me. Right before my wedding, I said. Did you read page 3, silence? I said, Brittany, did you read it? She said, I know what you do. Megan, something went completely still inside me, because the sentence landed wrong, not the way an unexpected thing lands. The way a thing lands that was never supposed to be said. I said, what did you just say? A long pause. Then she said the thing that changed the shape of everything. She said, the letter from the army. 3 years ago, it came to Mom's house. Addressed to you, forwarded here by mistake. I was there when it arrived. I read it, I said. You read my Bronze Star citation, she said. I put it on the kitchen counter. I figured you would pick it up, I said. Brittany, 3 years ago you read a document that described exactly what I did in Kandahar, exactly what my unit did on that road. And then, for 3 more years, you watched Tyler tell his version of Kandahar at this family's dinner table. You watched everyone call him the only real soldier. You watched me sit at the far end of the table, and you said nothing. Her breath changed on the line. I said, did you know, when you called me 2 weeks ago and told me to keep the army thing low-key, did you already know what Tyler's story was missing? The silence told me. I said, I am not punishing you. I am done paying to be erased. Those are two different things. I hung up. There is a specific kind of wound that comes not from ignorance but from chosen ignorance. When you hold someone's truth in your own hands, read it, understand it, and then put it in a drawer because acting on it would require something of you, that is a choice. And when the result of that choice is that the person continues to be diminished, year after year while you watch, you are not a neutral party. You are a participant. I want to be fair to Brittany. She did not create Tyler's lie. But she had the evidence that contradicted it, and she chose the kitchen drawer. That choice has a name, and she eventually had to learn what it was. Here is something I have learned about the truth. You do not have to carry it very far yourself. You just have to stop standing in front of it. Once it has a clear line of sight, it travels faster than anything you could push. I told no one outside my family what had happened at the dinner. I did not need to. Tyler was falling apart quietly but completely. Because a man who has been carrying a lie for 9 years and has just been identified by the person whose truth that lie was built on top of, cannot simply continue as though nothing happened. He called Jake Morrison. Jake had been Tyler's squad second in command on that road in Kandahar. He had been trying to find my unit for years, not because Tyler asked him to, but because the men who walked out of that kill zone owed a debt they could not repay, and Jake Morrison was not the kind of man who could carry that quietly. Tyler told Jake everything, who I was, what unit I commanded, what had happened at the dinner. Jake called me at 7:14 in the morning. He said, Lieutenant Colonel Calloway, my name is Jake Morrison. I was in your kill zone in 2013, and I have been looking for you for 3 years. He told me what he had actually witnessed on that road. Tyler behind the vehicle, unable to move. The 40 minutes of waiting, my team walking the road device by device. One of my team members helping Tyler out of the vehicle at the end. He said, I want you to know something else. Tyler was put in for a commendation for Kandahar, for his leadership in the kill zone. The review board looked at the full record, including your unit's report. The commendation was denied in 2015. Tyler received the notification letter, and then he kept speaking at veterans events about what he did on that road for 4 more years. 2 weeks after the dinner, Jake spoke at a regional veterans gathering in Clarksville. He told the room what had actually happened on that road. He told them the name of the officer who led the EOD team. He said her own family thought she did administrative work. A veterans community in a military town is a small world. By Thanksgiving, the story had reached every corner of my mother's social circle. Then came the voicemail. Tyler's best man Derek accidentally forwarded me a voice message meant for Tyler. It was a recording of a conversation between Derek and Brittany. 3 days before the engagement dinner. Derek's voice careful. Britt. Tyler's story about Kandahar. The center of the road part. How did he know it was clear? Brittany's voice. Derek. Do not start. It is his story, Derek. I have done some reading. Kill zones like that. You do not walk infantry through without EOD clearing first. Brittany. It is his story. And it is his night. And I am asking you to let it be. A long pause. Derek. Okay. Brittany. Thank you. I sat in my car in a parking structure and listened to that voicemail twice. Brittany's owned best man had tried to raise a question about Tyler's story 3 days before the engagement dinner, and she had shut it down. She had not just read the letter 3 years ago and chosen the kitchen drawer. She had actively protected the story, even when the people closest to her were trying to examine it. Derek called me the same day he realized his mistake. He said, "I am sorry. I knew something was off. I have known Tyler for 11 years, and that story has never added up to me completely. I am going to talk to him, not because of you, because he is my best friend, and he has been carrying this wrong for a long time, and it is going to keep getting heavier." 4 weeks before the wedding, Tyler asked to speak at the veterans organization where he had been most celebrated. He called me the day before and told me what he intended to do. He said, "I am going to tell them the truth. The whole version. I am going to ask the organization to remove my name from the commendation they gave me." I said, "You do not owe me that," he said, "I know. I owe it to the record." He stood up at that event and told the real version of Panjwai. He told it flat and precise, without embellishment, the way men speak when they are done managing an impression. He described the freeze. He described my team walking the road. He described being helped to the extraction point. Then he said, "The officer who led that EOD team has been sitting at my fiancé's family table for 18 months while I accepted recognition for what her unit did. I have been telling a story that was missing its most important people. Her name is Lieutenant Colonel Megan Calloway. She is the reason 8 men went home that day. Not me. The room was quiet for a very long time. The wedding was the first Saturday of June. 3 days before it, Brittany called me. Not about the seating chart. Not about money. Not about anything she needed from me. She called to ask if I was coming. For the first time in my adult life, the answer was genuinely uncertain. I had spent 43 years showing up for this family, filling gaps, being the infrastructure, never understanding that showing up was a choice I could also make differently. I said, "I will be there." A pause. Then Brittany said, "Will you wear your uniform?" I was quiet, she said. "I know I do not have the right to ask that. I know what I did. I know what the letter means, and I know what the voicemail means, and I know what 3 years of silence means. I am not asking you to forgive that today. I am asking you to walk in as the full version of yourself." "Please," I said. "Okay," she said. "Okay." The morning of the wedding, I put on my Army service uniform. Not as a statement, not to make a point. I put it on because I had spent 20 years walking into that family's events carrying everything I actually was in a locked box in the trunk of my car. I was done leaving things in the trunk. I walked into the venue. My mother was in the lobby. She saw me from across the room and went very still. I braced for the wince, the small practiced wince she had developed over 30 years. Instead, she walked toward me. She stopped in front of me. She looked at me, not at what the neighbors coming through the door behind me would think, not at the optics, not at the Sunday church group arithmetic of it. She looked at me, she said, "You look exactly like your father." Just that. But I understood every word she meant. Tyler's squad occupied the first 3 pews on the groom's side. Jake Morrison saw me come down the aisle. I was a bridesmaid. Brittany had asked and I had said yes. And Jake stood up, without a word, without a signal, he just stood. The man beside him stood. The man beside him stood. 4 veterans in their Sunday clothes, standing in a wedding venue in Clarksville, Tennessee, the way you stand for something that deserves to be stood for. I had to look at the ceiling to hold myself together. At the reception, my commanding officer, Colonel James Whitfield, came through the door. He was not on the guest list. He does not go places without a reason. He shook my hand and handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was my promotion order. Full colonel, effective the following month. Stan is staying 3 feet away. She read it over my arm. Then she turned to the woman standing nearest to her, one of the church group neighbors she had spent 30 years performing for, and said without hesitation, without arithmetic, without checking the optics first, "My daughter is a colonel in the United States Army. She commands the soldiers who walk toward the bombs so that everyone else can come home." Plain, unembellished, the most honest sentence she had ever said about me at a social gathering in 43 years. That evening, at my mother's house after the reception, she brought out a box, a shoebox, small, worn at the corners, found in the attic 2 weeks earlier. She set it on the kitchen table and opened it with hands that were not quite steady. Inside was my commissioning announcement from 2005. A few newspaper clippings, my name in the caption of a photo of new officers. The program from my commissioning ceremony, soft at the folds from being handled many times. A printout of the 760th EOD Battalion Unit history from the Army's public website, printed in 2014, the year after Kandahar, and at the bottom, face down, a photograph I had never seen, me on my commissioning day, in my dress uniform, young and serious, and my father, standing slightly apart from the crowd, watching me, with an expression I had never once seen on his face in person. Keys, he had been careful, always, never to let me catch it, pride open and unguarded. The way a man looks when he is feeling something too large for words. On the back, in my father's careful block printing. The handwriting I would have known anywhere, 4 words. My girl walks toward it. I sat at my mother's kitchen table in my army uniform, and I held that photograph and I could not speak. My father had carried the proof of who I was in a shoebox, in his attic, where no one could make it small, and taken it to his grave without ever letting me know he was watching. We were the same kind of person, my father and I. We both kept the most important thing somewhere safe from people who might have made it small. And we both paid for it with years we could not get back. Brittany sat down across from me. No audience, no story to manage, she said. I decided who you were when we were kids. And I never questioned it, not once, because it was easier. Because it made me the interesting one. Because nobody ever made me stop. Her voice broke open. She said, I read that letter 3 years ago. I held your Bronze Star citation in my hands. And I put it in a drawer because if I let myself really know who you were, I would have had to look at who I had been to you for 30 years. And I was not ready to do that. She reached across the table. She said, I am sorry, Meg. Not because Tyler's story fell apart. Not because my friends are asking questions. Because of what I did to you. Because you were keeping all of us standing the whole time. And I stood up at my engagement dinner and called you a paper pusher, in front of the man you once walked into a kill zone to save. I had waited 43 years to hear something like that. I had imagined, in the worst stretches, that hearing it would feel like winning. It did not feel like winning. It felt like setting down something I had been carrying so long I had stopped feeling it as weight. I reached across the table and I took my sister's hand, and we sat there in my mother's kitchen, with my father's photograph between us, until neither of us needed to say anything else. That was 16 months ago. Tyler and Brittany are married. Tyler resigned from the veteran speaking circuit. He has been in real, committed therapy, working through what happened on that road and what happened to the story over 9 years. He called me 3 months ago to say the work has been the hardest thing he has ever done. I told him that was probably about right. He started a small nonprofit connecting veterans with advocates who help them navigate VA benefits. He asked me to sit on the advisory board. He said he needed someone who understood what invisible service costs. He was right. Jake Morrison sent me a photograph of the 4 men who were on that road at a family gathering last summer. Children everywhere, a backyard in late afternoon light. He wrote, because of your team, all of this exists. I keep that photograph on my desk, next to my father's. My mother has 2 photographs on the wall of her dining room now. My father at the warehouse, in his work clothes the year before he retired, and me in my dress uniform, my citation mounted beside it in a simple frame. She hung them side by side, 2 kinds of real work, finally in the same frame, where the neighbors can see. I want to spend the last few minutes of this story saying what I think it actually means. Not what happened to one woman in Tennessee, but what I think is happening everywhere, at dinner tables all over the country, quietly enough that nobody names it. So let me name it. The first thing. Tyler Harrington was not born dishonest. He was a young man who survived something terrifying and came home, and found that the version of that survival where he was the hero was easier to live inside than the version where he froze. Over time, the easier version became the only version. And the people who cleared the road he was taking credit for walking, they became invisible. We do this, all of us. We tell the version of our story where we are the protagonist. We step around the names of the people who cleared our road. If there is someone in your life whose contribution you have been stepping around, whose name you have been leaving out of the story you tell about yourself, it is not too late to put their name back in. It will cost you something. Do it anyway. The second thing is for everyone who sees themselves in my seat at that table, the far end, near the extension leaf that does not match. You are not obligated to stay invisible to keep the peace. I know it feels like generosity. I know it feels like grace. I told myself that for 20 years. But what you are actually doing is making a transaction. You are trading your truth for their comfort, year by year, dinner by dinner, check by check, and the people around you have been making that trade without acknowledging it is a trade. Because the useful person never presents the bill. You are allowed to present the bill, not with anger, not with a scene. You just have to stop paying to be erased. Being needed was never supposed to cost you being seen. Those were never supposed to be a trade. Someone sold you that transaction and told you it was what good people do. It was not. It was just convenient. For them. The third thing is the one I want you to carry. My father kept a shoebox in the attic, full of proof that he had been watching the whole time, full of proof that he knew exactly who I was. And he carried that for 23 years without ever saying it to my face. 4 words on the back of a photograph. My girl walks toward it. Do not do that. Tell the people you love what you actually see in them. Say it at the dinner table, not on the back of a photograph. Not in a shoebox in the dark, where no one can make it small, but no one can receive it either. Say it out loud, with their name. With the specific detail that makes them remarkable. In the room where everyone is gathered. My father had 4 words and a shoebox. You have whole conversations ahead of you. Please use them. And the bravest thing I ever did was not walking down a road in Kandahar in an 80-pound suit. I had training for that. I had protocol. I knew exactly what I was walking toward. The bravest thing I ever did was walking into my mother's dining room in my uniform and letting my family finally see what I was. Because for that walk I had no training, no protocol, no suit, just me. And the decision that I was finally done being a rumor in my own family's story. I hope you make that decision. For yourself, not for them. You have spent long enough making things easy for everyone else. You are allowed to be seen. You always were. The pin was just the moment it became unavoidable. Do not wait for a pin. Walk toward it yourself. If this story reached you, if you saw yourself somewhere at that table, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe. Leave me a comment. Tell me. Is there someone in your life who has been taking credit for a road they did not clear? Or are you the one who cleared the road and never got named? I read every comment. You are not alone in this. And share this with someone who has spent too long at the far end of the table. They deserve to know they are not the only one sitting there. One last thing before I go. What I described today is a painful family dynamic, one that allowed for hard conversations and eventually for repair. But I know that for some of you. What I am describing is not just a painful dynamic. It is something more controlled, more isolating. Someone managing your story in ways that go beyond family patterns. Controlling your money, your relationships, your ability to speak about your own life. If that is you, please hear me. What I experienced and what you are living are different things. Please talk to someone, a trusted friend, a counselor, a professional. The National Domestic Violence Hotline is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You do not have to carry it alone. You never had to. Take care of each other, and take care of yourselves. Before you go, I want to say the thing this story was really about. Not the pin. Not the dinner. Not even the lie that fell apart at a family table in Tennessee. This story is about the transaction we make when we decide that keeping the peace is worth more than telling the truth. And most of us make that transaction so early, and so quietly that we stop recognizing it as a choice. We tell ourselves it is generosity. We tell ourselves it is grace, maturity, rising above. We tell ourselves that the useful person does not need to be thanked, that being needed is enough, that asking to seen is asking for too much. It is not. It was never true. And the cost of believing it is your own life, year by year, dinner by dinner. In rooms full of people who love you, but have stopped being curious about who you actually are. Here is the first thing I want you to take with you. If you have been the invisible one, the capable one, the dependable one, the one who holds the ceiling up while everyone else decorates the walls, you are not required to keep paying that price. You are allowed to stop. Not with anger. Not with a scene. You simply stop making yourself small. And the truth, once it has room to breathe, will do the rest. Here is the second thing. If there is someone in your life whose contribution you have been stepping around, whose name you have been leaving out of the story you tell about yourself, put their name back in. Today. Not eventually. Today. The road you are walking may have been cleared by someone who is still waiting to be acknowledged. That acknowledgement costs you nothing. And to them it may be everything. And the third thing, the one I want you to carry longest. Do not keep your pride in a box in the attic. Do not write the 4 most important words you ever felt on the back of a photograph that the person will not find until after you are gone. Tell the people you love what you see in them. Specifically. Out loud. In the room. While there is still time. My father saw exactly who I was. He just never found the words while he was alive to say it. You have words. You have time. You have conversations ahead of you that your father or your mother or your sister or your child is waiting for without knowing they are waiting. Use them. Being seen is not a luxury. It is not something you earn after you have been useful enough for long enough. It is something every person at every table deserves. This content was manually researched, developed, and edited by our team built not by automation, but by human hands and genuine intention, because we believe that stories told with care carry something that cannot be generated. Every word in this story was chosen to bring you meaning, truth, and a lesson worth keeping. Thank you for watching. Thank you for staying until the end. It means more than you know.